Hi everyone, welcome to my presentation on technology access, different models and applications for integrating technology into the classroom while considering how students are able to access and use technology at home and at school. I would like to thank the library for this wonderful setting and PowerPoint's design ideas feature, because that has a hand in basically every single slide you'll see today. So without any further ado, here's our little table of contents. We have the background, then some pedagogical application, and some questions at the end for us to cover. I also am realizing that my head might cover things, so hopefully I can move it as we go along, but that's where we go. So first, my background, why I'm interested in this in the first place. And surprise, surprise, a lot of this came from experience learning from home recently, right? Like pandemics and whatever else we have, both at school, and I spent a semester just learning from home in mid-pandemic, and I was with my brother in high school. He's a senior this year, and so he was able to talk to me about a lot of the different things that the school was doing and a lot of the different access issues his friends were having. And I saw a lot of discrepancies in access at home versus at school in devices and internet service. The high school where my brother was at was giving out, well, not giving out, but loaning out Chromebooks for students to use who didn't have anything at home. And they also would have trucks that provided internet service at random parks because a lot of the students in my area just don't have enough internet access or good enough internet to handle doing school at home. And so my experience with it is a little bit different from the high schoolers. I mean, I had computer labs and a couple of desktops maybe in elementary schools, and then it got upgraded to iPad carts, and then the iPad carts were replaced by Chromebook carts when we realized that giving a bunch of middle school and elementary school students iPads was not great for the longevity of the iPad. And I've used a personal laptop all through college and a personal phone as well. I used my phone a little bit in school. And in my clinical experience, I'm seeing this one-to-one idea where every single student has a laptop that is theirs, that they use all the years that they are at that school, and that they even have the option to buy back after they are done. I assume at a lower price because it's been used for 3 to 4 years. But yeah, they have free use and there's limited monitoring. So next up, we just have a couple of the potential models that you can have. The first one is bring your own device, where students bring a device from home. And usually that's a mobile device, because as we'll get to later with access, students have wildly different access to different types of technology and devices, but overwhelmingly most students, even across different socioeconomic or racial or ethnic lines, do have a mobile phone that they can use. Whether that's one that is compatible with what you want to do in your classroom is something that you're going to want to keep track of, but that's what we got going on there, and they just have free use in this for using it in their learning to help it. Obviously, you can still have rules around it, but they have it around, and it's an important part of the classroom that they have that responsibility. The next one is one-to-one access, which is usually a laptop, and it's provided for each student where they have school-wide integration of this. Every teacher expects it, and they have free asterisk software because it is free to the student, not to the school. But at Intech, the school that I am at right now, the students have Adobe software. They don't have to pirate it. They have the Office suite with Word and PowerPoint and everything. And they also have really fancy engineering programs because it's that type of school. And one-to-one access is kind of this paragon. I don't know if paragon is the right word, but it's this sort of like higher echelon of technology integration. Like, this is what you want. Like, even if students don't have access at home, the school can give it to them, right? Obviously, different districts are going to have different access to this. And this is a big consideration with internet and device access. Students wildly, I would encourage you to at least take a look at the ACT thing. It's the first source that I put. I think it might be the second. And in that, it just breaks down different devices, different internet access across these sort of racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic lines. It's a really quick look through. They have some good systemic sort of advice. They advise that school internet should be a lot better, which I found was a common theme, even from very recent articles, that school internet is not good enough for a lot of the things we are wanting to do in the classroom yet. And so I know that we cannot magically fix the school internet, but knowing about these issues and other ones that I'll bring up are important in us becoming advocates for change in this area. The next issue that I found was balancing work time between class and school and home, right? Like, if students don't have access at home, you're going to have a lot of class time devoted to work on bigger projects, because that's the time that you know they can work on it. And in order to be fair to all students, that's kind of what you have to do, right? Maybe not, we can discuss that. Then they have school time. At InTech, they have just free time. They have like designated periods to do their work on their laptops at school, or to do whatever else they need to do. It doesn't have to be on their laptop. But at school, they have that better internet that the small little charter school does. And then they also have home, right? Like, not all students will have access at home that we talked about, and they might not have time, they have responsibility. There's just so much stuff going on in this that we have to keep in mind. It's not just, oh, I'm gonna have my students make a podcast and it'll be great because students love making podcasts. Like, podcast assignments, I love them. But you have to consider what the kids are working with, right? The next thing that I found in my research was this idea of a 2-year decline, because a lot of these programs are newer, and they aren't as new as you might think, but we talk about that first year, and we talk about that increase in motivation, that academic success, which does happen. Year one, I mean, if you prepare that long for something, you're gonna tend to do well. And so students do great, school does great, and then year two comes, the technology isn't new anymore, you don't have the motivation to work through the same issues, new issues arise, technology gets old. And so you have to deal with this thing called the J curve, which I just took from this Swallow article that I have referenced. And this is when a lot of programs fall out, people give up on them. And this was about one-to-one specifically, but I would apply this to other technology changes, or any change you do in your classroom, really, that the second year is going to have problems that you didn't the first year, and that doesn't mean it's a failure. It could still be, but holding out into year 3, year 4, and on, you can go back up and you can see the benefits that you were expecting after that first year. Finally, there's the issue of like distractions and monitoring students, filtering them. I was talking with my mentor teacher about how they use it. He has a pretty lax approach for most of his students, at least the high school students who I spend more time with. And, you know, he does minimal monitoring, and there are minimal filters unless they're working on an assignment or they're showing that they don't have that responsibility. But in younger grades, he has a bit of a harder time, and that might be a little pandemic related. It might not be. We don't have enough information to say, so come back to this presentation in a few years. Finally, I said finally twice, but there's digital literacy, both your own and your students. I don't think that we should, even if we are in a one-to-one school where everyone has their devices and all the other teachers are using it all the time, I think that if we are not proficient, if we don't have that ability in the things we're asking our students to do, then we should just not have our students do those things, right? We should have students do technological things that we are proficient in. Now, I think that we should learn these skills. I don't think, if we are not inclined at all, that we should just do nothing. But keeping that in mind will help your classroom run smoothly, because if it's a technology you know, you'll know how to build an assignment around it, and if you don't know it, then things aren't going to go well, right? And then keeping in mind your students' literacy. They may be proficient, but proficiency doesn't always entail literacy, right? Like, your students they might not know how to use their phone without going on Twitter every 5 minutes. I struggle with this sometimes, often. I was being too kind to myself there. And so teaching that digital literacy on top of all your other responsibilities, it can be a lot, I will admit. But I think that that's an important thing too. bring into your classrooms. Now, finally, getting into more concrete pedagogical applications. This is where I wish I could move myself. I don't know how I can move myself. We're just going to live with the fact that you can't see the bottom right corner thing. I think this is the only time we will have this issue, and I'm a little upset that this happened this way. If only I'd moved that adjusting assessment right. But anyway, enough about the optics here. Reliance on technology. You're getting this is the first time you're getting it because we've been doing well so far, and I don't want to do another 10 minutes. I only have the library room for so long. But with the reliance on technology, and this is from a paper that I read about student input. They polled students anonymously, and then they had a classroom discussion. And students brought up all sorts of positives. They brought up the convenience, they brought up the learning potential, they brought up the comfort, just all of these great things about technology. But one of the things that almost every student brought up, like 89% of the students brought this up at some point, was that something in the technology that they used annoyed them. That there was something that went wrong and they didn't like it and it was annoying. And that was kind of funny to me, but also that's an important thing to note, that students aren't always going to love the technology you use, because the technology, let's be real, the technology that we want to use is almost always not going to be the technology that you can use in the school. There are firewalls, you can't use Houdamath, sometimes you can't use Kahoot, sometimes you can't play Wordle, like what's the point? And so you need a backup, or you need to know when something is going wrong, how to switch before students get too annoyed. And that also gets into adjusting your assessment to student ability and desires, right? You won't catch all students in each type of learning you do, and this is true of the technologies you use. If a student really hates using Adobe or Photoshop or anything like that, that doesn't mean you shouldn't use it at all, but it means that you shouldn't use Photoshop on every assignment. And if you get a student to care about one aspect of their learning, that'll usually, at least from a conversation I had with my mentor teacher, he said that if he gets them to care about one thing in their writing, we're doing writing right now, that he sees that they're able to get through the things that they struggle with. Next up is freedom of choice. One of the things that I loved that got brought up was this idea of personalization of devices, whether it's their personal one or a one-to-one device. But students feeling that ownership and being able to have that creativity really helps their motivation. And you can add that into the format and adaptation, as long as more so in a one-to-one environment than a bring your own device environment. But students can have more freedom to use different programs, different things to show the same learning, right? You want to show students at their best and what they might end up using later, right? And finally, there's student age and format. I'm so sorry that I talk really fast. Like, this is a long presentation and it's one that's hard to listen to at 2 speed. But there's, as far as student age and format goes, one of the papers that I read, and this sounded true from my conversation with my mentor teacher, is younger students do better with shorter assessments and assignments when online. That the younger students can use tablets more and they have more fun doing shorter things, whereas older students like digging their fingers in and getting into like bigger issues, right? And they have that sort of wherewithal, that diligence, they have that maturity. So keep in mind your students' development, their age, when formatting your assignments. Different grades, different people are going to have different needs. And obviously these are generalizations and each group will have students who are better with the other, but this is a general rule of thumb that the researchers and anecdotally have seen. Finally, real quick, here are the questions. Unfortunately, I was wrong. We also have my face, not even my face, like I could just move over here and we'd be fine, but all these books. Anyway, so the question here, right, is how do you make a fair standard for student work online? Like, do you give them options? How do you grade students equally? That's one thing that I don't really know, so put in the comments below. How should we handle possible distractions that we were talking about? Do you start strict? Do you not? How do you adapt between schools where my mentor teacher, when he taught in North Carolina, had one Chromebook cart for the whole hallway, or now he has students who have their own like super cool laptops that get updated every once in a while. Next up is how do you integrate digital literacy into your lessons that we brought up earlier? Most of these questions I brought up earlier. And then finally, what does integration without an over-reliance on technology look like? I'm only covering like 3 letters here. We were so close. But that's just me asking, like, how do you envision using technology if you watch this and you're bored by everything I said? But anyway, that's about it. If you want to see my annotated bibliography, that'll be in the doobly-doo. And yeah, we're at 15 minutes, so I'm going to call it. But thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you.